Hi, I've really collected the rarest and most catchy historical photos for you. Today we'll take a look at the moments that got into the frame by accident or miraculously preserved. On 4 June 1944, B-29, number 282, ditched in the Bay of Bengal after a fuel transfer failure and snapped in half. 11 crew went into the water, 7 were rescued, and 1 survivor is seen gripping the number 1 engine. In 1947, at Landsberg Prison, former SS camp doctor Edward Krebsbach was photographed seconds before his sentence was carried out. Courts tied him to thousands of prisoner deaths, including about 900 linked to chemical injections. On 24 July 1913, this Mongolian man is photographed wearing a kangwe, a heavy wooden collar used as a public punishment and restraint. The frame forces the head through a small opening, making eating. This photo shows colonial officer Maurice Vidal Portman posing with Great Andamanese people, a community once estimated at 2,000 to 6,600. By the 1931 census, only about 90 were recorded after decades of disease displacement. These images document the wreck of actor James Dean's silver Porsche after his road collision on September 30th, 1955, while he was driving to a race event in Salinas. In 1942, at Cavite City's port, Japanese forces photographed captured torpedoes and other naval gear taken after the fall of the Philippine base. Cavite was the main U.S. Navy yard area near Manila, so losing its stockpiles hit repairs and supply across the region. Carla Faye Tucker was convicted in Texas for a 1983 double murder and became the first woman executed in the state since the 19th century when she was put to death in 1998. This aerial photo shows Hiroshima burning after the United States atomic bombing on August 6, 1945, shot from about 25,000 feet. The blast and fires destroyed most of the city and killed tens of thousands within days. In 1976, Muhammad Ali walked through Volendam in the Netherlands, signing autographs for locals in traditional dress. By then, he was already a 3-time heavyweight champion. In early 1900s London, Edith Garud, a 4'11" jiu-jitsu instructor, trained suffragettes in throws and joint locks to resist police grabs. Her classes helped inspire the Women's Social and Political Union's all-female bodyguard that protected leaders from arrest. In the early 1980s, Vietnam veterans marched for work with signs like, "We'll trade useless medals for decent jobs," calling out broken promises after service. Many faced high unemployment, untreated trauma. This photo shows Romanian aviators and their aircraft linked to the mission that carried news of Transylvania's union with Romania in late 1918. At that moment, airplanes were still fragile wood and fabric machines. Japanese sailors are arranged to form a 16-petal chrysanthemum, the Imperial seal of Japan, used as a state emblem for centuries. These mass formations were staged for propaganda photos, turning military discipline into a single, instantly recognizable symbol. Elvis Presley is pictured in United States Army gear in Germany in 1958 after being drafted at the peak of his fame. He served about 2 years, reached sergeant, and his time overseas shaped his image and even his later music choices. On July 24, 1966, in Lamdong Province, United States paratrooper Sergeant James R. Cohn pulled a puppy from a riverbank cave after it bit his hand. The photo captures a rare quiet moment in Vietnam, with the soldier still wearing an ammunition belt. This is the crowd at the first Rock in Rio de Janeiro in 1985, one of the biggest music festivals ever staged at the time. The inaugural edition drew about 1 million people across 10 days and featured major acts like Queen, Iron Maiden, and AC/DC. This 1937 photo shows Joseph Stalin kissing polar aviator Ivan Spirin during a public ceremony, with Vyacheslav Molotov visible at the right. Such staged greetings were part of Soviet propaganda. Stalingrad, November 1942. Guard soldiers of the 36th Guards Rifle Division set up an anti-tank position in the rubble with a PTRD 1941 anti-tank rifle. One man shown here, Mikhail Basarabov, was killed in 1943. In 1911 in Nepal, King George V took part in a royal hunt that was reported to have killed 39 tigers, 18 rhinoceroses, and 4 bears in 10 days. The trip was staged as an imperial spectacle with elephants, large crews. In Santa Monica in 1946, Abby Stockton raises a 135-pound barbell overhead despite being about 5 feet 2 and 115 pounds. She was a pioneer of modern women's strength training. The Samoan crisis ended in March 1889 when a cyclone hit Apia Harbor and wrecked rival German and United States warships without a battle. The storm sank or disabled multiple ships in hours and forced the powers to back down from a colonial showdown. This is Brigitte Helm on the 1927 set of Metropolis, wearing the film's iconic robot suit that became a blueprint for science fiction design. The costume was so rigid and heavy that crew had to feed her through a straw and adjust her between takes. On February 11, 1967, Operation Pershing began in Bindin Province, led by the 1st Cavalry Division in one of the war's longest United States Army campaigns. It ran for about 11 months into January 1968. On August 9, 1974, Richard Nixon left the White House after resigning, becoming the first United States president to quit the office. He stepped down over the Watergate scandal, and Vice President Gerald Ford was sworn in the same day. Marilyn Monroe is pictured at bandleader Ray Anthony's party on August 3, 1952, captured in bright Kodachrome color. Shots like this show how she was already a major Hollywood draw before her biggest films made her a global icon. In the 1890s in Queensland, Australia, a glass negative captured girls sprinting in a field game, freezing fast motion that early cameras usually missed. Bud Cort in Robert Altman's film Brewster McCloud, released in 1970, wearing the homemade wing rig that defines the movie's strange, do-it-yourself flight obsession. The film became a cult title for its offbeat humor and surreal scenes set inside the Houston Astrodome. This image is often shared as a Vulcan flying over the B-24D Lady Be Good, a bomber that vanished over the Libyan desert in 1943 and was found almost intact in 1958. The catch is that the Vulcan first flew in the 1950s. This is a costume test for the film Green Fire, with the slate showing Grace Kelly and a date in May 1953 during early production. Green Fire was released in 1954 and set in Colombia, pairing Kelly with Stuart Granger in an adventure story. On February 11, 1936, General Motors launched its Parade of Progress in Lakeland, Florida, a traveling tech show meant to sell the future to small-town America. Brooklands, Surrey, April 1934. Race cars line up at Britain's first purpose-built motor racing circuit, opened in 1907 with steep banked corners. This is the New Zealand Bob Semple tank, a 1940 improvised armored vehicle built on a Caterpillar tractor with thin corrugated steel plates. It was never used in combat and is remembered as a desperate stopgap when New Zealand feared invasion. In 1919, German submarine U-118 broke free when its tow cable snapped and washed ashore at Hastings, turning a war machine into a seaside attraction. Marilyn Monroe is pictured in the late 1940s before stardom, when she was still building her image through pin-up shoots and small film roles. Within a few years, she signed major studio contracts. Around 1985, Illinois farmer Herman Warsaw posed by a soil pit after reportedly producing a record corn yield of about 370 bushels per acre. His farm was said to yield roughly 38 bushels per acre in 1941. In 1980, 19-year-old Diana Spencer was photographed outside her Earl's Court flat in London, months before her engagement to Prince Charles was announced in 1981. She was still living as a young kindergarten assistant. On February 9, 1950, Senator Joseph McCarthy launched his accusations that the United States State Department was packed with communists, igniting the Second Red Scare. The claim fueled years of investigations and blacklists. This is the Bank of America Data Center at 1455 Market Street in San Francisco, photographed in August 1979, filled with rows of mainframe tape drives and operator consoles. Rooms like this ran batch processing for millions of transactions. In 1974, at a Catholic high school in St. Cloud, Minnesota, students packed themselves into the hallway telephone booth for a staged group photo. Before cell phones, booths were the only private spot to call home. On February 9, 1918, the United States Army organized a chaplain school at Fort Monroe, Virginia, formalizing training for clergy headed to World War I units. The Three Stooges pose beside a theater poster advertising their live stage appearances, showing they were not just movie shorts, but a touring act too. Their slapstick team became one of the longest-running comedy brands. In 1910, at St. Augustine, Florida, the speedboats Vita and Vita Jr. sprint to the finish in an early powerboat race. These lightweight craft ran on raw horsepower and minimal safety gear, making crashes and engine failures a constant risk. In 1975, Gary Dahl turned the pet rock into a craze by selling an ordinary stone for $3.95 in a branded box with a joke care guide. The fad lasted about 6 months, but moved millions of units and made him a millionaire almost overnight. In 1955, Scuderia Lancia handed 6 of its 8 Lancia D50 Formula One cars to Scuderia Ferrari after Lancia withdrew, a deal brokered by ACI President Filippo Caracciolo. Ferrari evolved the D50 into the Ferrari D50. The cast of Monty Python's Flying Circus pose in 1976 in one of their deliberately absurd, no-context photo setups. The series ran from 1969 to 1974 and helped define modern sketch comedy with fast cuts. In northern Rhodesia in 1931 to 1932, villagers pose with what appears to be a huge python skin stretched across the group. Pythons can grow over 5 meters long, so a hide this size hints at a truly massive snake. During the Korean War in 1950, a United States paratrooper paints "The End" over a portrait of Kim Il-sung, turning enemy propaganda into a battlefield message. Photos like this show how soldiers fought for morale and symbolism as much as territory. Rio de Janeiro, 1968. Students run from police during protests against Brazil's military dictatorship, part of the wave of street clashes that year. The crackdown soon hardened, and later in 1968, the regime issued Institutional Act No. 5. In 1992, during the Afghan Civil War, Mujahideen fighters rest inside the Kabul Museum beside ancient Buddhist statues, with rifles still in hand. The museum's collections were later heavily damaged and looted in the 1990s. Vietnam, 1967. A soldier stands beside a massive field of spent shell casings left after a heavy artillery barrage. Each casing is one fired round, so this single pile shows how fast logistics and firepower could reshape the battlefield. Saipan, 1944. A Sherman tank bogged down in soft sand and sank before it could fully land during the Battle of Saipan. A Japanese landing craft sits behind it, hinting at how quickly beach fighting turned into a salvage race under fire. Hamburg Harbor, 1944. Thousands of church bells were seized and piled up to be melted down for the German war industry. Most were stripped from occupied Europe, and some were later identified and returned after the war by matching inscriptions and foundry marks. Cape Gloucester, late 1943. Wrecked Japanese landing craft pile into a boat graveyard after repeated Allied air raids ahead of the Marine landing. The Battle of Cape Gloucester ran from December 26, 1943 to January 16. Tampa Daily Times, March 14, 1958. The Anglin brothers are photographed in court during a bank robbery trial, with the caption naming John and Clarence of Ruskin and Alfred of Tampa. These three later became infamous for the 1962 Alcatraz escape. On January 30, 1947, King Abdulaziz Al Saud visited 20th Century Fox and dined at the studio's Café de Paris. Marilyn Monroe, still an unknown contract player, was photographed just a table away. In 1999, in Center County, Pennsylvania, a snowmobile rides across the long viaduct bridge near Peel, a risky shortcut locals once took. The metal grating and open drop beside the tracks show how little margin there was for a slide or stall. During the Battle of Cape Gloucester in late 1943, United States Marine Major Richard A. Evans displays a captured Japanese flare pistol taken from the battlefield. Such pistols fired signal flares to coordinate units. Oklahoma City, 1939. An oil field worker's family stands outside a tiny shed home with a sign advertising washing during unemployment. The wife took in laundry and ironing for cash. A Black Watch sniper of the 51st Highland Division aims an Enfield No. 4 Mark I T from a shattered loft in Gennep, Netherlands, using a blown-out wall as a firing slit. Tarawa, November 1943. A bulldozer crawls off a landing craft through seawater while troops watch, bringing the heavy gear needed to clear obstacles and push supplies ashore. In 1934, the Soviet destroyer Engels, Orphei class, was fitted with an experimental 305 mm recoilless naval gun, far larger than a destroyer's normal weapons. The idea was to get battleship-level punch without heavy recoil. Around 1910, a man rides a water tricycle, a pedal-powered boat with 3 pontoons for stability and a small sail for extra push. It was an early personal watercraft idea built for calm bays where you could cruise without an engine. In 1912, floodwater turned Gregory Boulevard into a shallow river as residents gathered to watch the street disappear underwater. Early city drainage could not handle sudden downpours, so whole neighborhoods often became temporary canals like this. New York City, 1914. Riders spill off a streetcar at Broadway and 242nd Street, packed shoulder to shoulder on the open platforms. This was the tail end of Manhattan streetcar life, before buses and subways took over most routes. World War II. United States Rangers in the United Kingdom practiced storming drills on a small craft with an assault ladder, rehearsing fast climbs onto ship sides and seawalls. Training like this was built to reduce seconds under fire during real landings and raids. George Machine Gun Kelly, a major United States gangster of the early 1930s, is shown under heavy guard after his capture. He was convicted for kidnapping oilman Charles Urschel in 1933 and was sentenced to life in federal prison. Des Plaines, Illinois, 1955. Customers packed the parking lot at one of the first McDonald's outlets, built for fast drive-up service under bright lights. This store became a template for the chain's rapid expansion across the United States. Cape Gloucester, late 1943. United States Marine engineers built a log bridge across a stream to keep troops and supplies moving toward the Japanese-held airfield. In that jungle campaign, mud and flooded creeks could stop an advance faster than enemy fire. Mae West is pictured with Albert Chalky Wright, a former featherweight boxing champion who worked as her chauffeur and close aide in the 1930s and 1940s. Their partnership drew attention in segregated-era Hollywood. Los Angeles, April 7, 1933. Crowds packed the sidewalks to celebrate legal beer returning after 13 years of prohibition. It followed the Cullen-Harrison Act, which allowed low-alcohol beer and wine months before full repeal arrived in 1933. In the winter of 1846 to 1847, the Donner Party was trapped by early Sierra Nevada snow near Donner Pass after taking a supposed shortcut, leaving about half of the 87 travelers dead. Knott's Berry Farm, 1965. A giant sign boasts 50 acres free parking, showing how car culture shaped early theme parks. The lot is packed with mid-60s American cars, including a Plymouth Barracuda under the billboard. Operation Veritable, February 8, 1945. Troops load RP-3 rockets into a land mattress launcher for the Reichswald offensive. The system used 16 or 30 tubes and could throw rockets about 8,000 yards at a blistering rate of roughly 4 per second. On February 12, 1909, marathon winner James Clark posed in Brooklyn with a big X on his singlet, marking the champion. Early city marathons were gritty road races on rough streets, and winners often trained while holding factory or dock jobs. Grand Central Terminal, New York, 1954. Workers repair the famous four-faced clock above the information booth while the concourse runs underneath them. That clock and booth became one of the city's classic meeting points. On October 1, 1928, a ribbon cutting marked the new concrete road between Indiana and Chillicothe, then part of the Benjamin Franklin Highway, now Route 422. Du Bois, Pennsylvania, March 17, 1976. A downtown fire destroyed Way Office Supply and the Young Men's Shop, with crews battling thick smoke, snow, and about 15-degree temperatures. This dining hall sat about 500 feet underground in the Bonanza Mine at Kennecott, Alaska, where crews ate and worked in an all-weather tunnel world. In deep winter, heavy snow could trap miners inside the site, so they sometimes lived. This is the B-24 Lady Be Good, which went missing over North Africa in 1943 and was found in the Sahara about 15 years later, eerily preserved by the dry desert. Searchers later traced the crew's survival trek using scattered gear. Consuelo Vanderbilt, born into the fortune of America's Vanderbilt dynasty, was raised in the world of Gilded Age money and social power. She later became Duchess of Marlborough through a headline-making marriage that symbolized the era's cash for titles. Paris, 1925. Veterans with severe facial injuries from the First World War gathered for a private banquet, part of France's Gueule Cassée Brotherhood. Their wounds pushed early plastic and reconstructive surgery forward. Vail, Oregon, 4th of July, 1941. Kids in costume ride a decorated bicycle with an America First sign, echoing the isolationist slogan that was everywhere in the United States right before it entered the Second World War. In Burma, between 1926 and 1929, a family dehusks rice by hand with a heavy wooden pestle and stone mortar, photographed during German ethnographer Egon von Eichstedt's expedition. A horse-drawn wagon packed with workers pauses outside an Anaheim brewery, a snapshot of the Boomtown years when the city of Anaheim first incorporated in 1870. Just 2 years later, it reversed course. Florida airboats skim a grassy marsh at race speed, their huge propellers blasting mist behind them as a checkered flag waits ahead. These flat-bottom boats were built to run where normal boats would bog down, turning swamp travel into a roaring sport. In 1970, the funk band Tower of Power posed on a street corner outside a Diamond Brokers and California loan office, looking like they just stepped out of a new sound. Montan Moreland was a fast-talking American comedian and actor who became a familiar face in many 1940s Hollywood comedies and mystery films. Stories around the Three Stooges say he was considered in the post-Shemp shuffle. A tense line forms in Seattle in 1886 as armed forces move into the streets after anti-Chinese attacks shook the city. This is what a city looks like when fear turns into policy in a single night. In 1937 Paris, a street vendor sits in the Marais as Yiddish posters and price notices cover the walls behind her. This same neighborhood would be raided and emptied just a few years later, turning scenes like this into rare evidence of daily life. In April 1945 in Italy, German General Otto Fretter Pico surrenders to Brazilian General Olimpio Falconier after his column is trapped near Collecchio and Fornovo di Terro. The Brazilian Expeditionary Force captured nearly 15,000 men in one of its biggest victories of the war. Tiny Lund steers the number 21 car to victory as the checkered flag drops at the 1963 Daytona 500. One race can make a driver immortal, and this blurry finish line moment is where his legend locked in. At the 1928 Winter Olympics in St. Moritz, Athletes raced headfirst on tiny sleds in skeleton, a sport so fast it looks reckless even in still photos. The crowd is close enough to touch the track, watching a blur of steel runners and nerve decide the winner. Friends, if you like such a lively story and photos, please support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel. Write in the comments which shot hooked you the most. A towering wave crashes over the bow of HMS Hood on January 8, 1932, swallowing the forward gun turrets in white water. It is a blunt reminder that even one of the Royal Navy's most famous battlecruisers could be humbled by the open sea. In 1937 Los Angeles, a lone woman picketed with a sign demanding an end to Immigration Department raids. The photo freezes a tense Great Depression street where one person challenged government power in public. On August 17, 1961 at Yankee Stadium, Whitey Ford and Satchel Paige sat on the dugout steps, trading pitching secrets face to face. It captured two legends from different eras, meeting in one quiet moment before the game. Ramon Fonst was born in Cuba under the Spanish Empire and became one of fencing's early Olympic superstars. He died in 1959, the same year Fidel Castro took power, linking his lifetime to two different Cubas. In 1970, a niche beauty contest crowned Miss American Vampire, complete with a dark veil, ornate crown, and a sash made for the camera. The deadpan pose makes it feel like a real pageant and a gothic joke at the same time. On June 10, 1944, French women poured drinks for United States soldiers after Trevière was liberated in Normandy, just days after D-Day. Their smiles capture a rare calm moment between battles while the front line was still close. Times Square in 1967 with a giant "You Only Live Twice" billboard selling Sean Connery's James Bond to the rush of taxis below. This was peak billboard-era New York, when movie ads were city-size and impossible to ignore. In 1986, Johnny Depp appears on the set of Platoon in one of his first major film roles, posing beside a helicopter and a ruined church. During filming, he hid a tribute to Sherilyn Fenn by adding her name to a helmet and her initials to a guitar used in the movie. The 1890s, a woman made a self-shot glass negative of herself riding a rocking horse in pants and boots, staring straight at the camera. The playful pose hides a bold detail for the era: trousers in a formal studio setting. William Knipe, your great-uncle, served as the first helmsman of the USS Balao, one of the United States Navy's famed World War II submarines. That role meant he physically steered the boat while it surfaced and dived. In 1908 Savannah, Louis Wagner sat in Fiat No. 14 as officials and a megaphone announcer swarmed the car after the grand prize finish. The huge horn and cheering crowd show how early racing felt like street theater, loud and dangerously close. On February 16, 1945, a United States battleship fires its main guns during the pre-landing bombardment of Iwo Jima. The muzzle blast and smoke show how naval artillery was used to weaken island defenses days before the Marines landed. In 1927, 17-year-old Myrtle Valstead, Miss Chicago, is photographed cooking in her kitchen in heels and an apron. The contrast was the point. Glamour on display, even in an ordinary home. In 1942, one or two tail stripes on United States Navy carrier planes were quick visual markers to identify the air group and squadron at a distance. During the Second Italo-Ethiopian War, a Catholic priest is photographed, blessing 6.5mm Fiat Revelli model, 1914 heavy machine guns as soldiers watch. The calm ritual beside lined-up weapons shows how faith and warfare were staged together for morale and propaganda. On November 6, 1951, Jane Russell poses backstage on the set of Son of Paleface, lounging on a ladder with a drink between takes. The huge hat, gloves, and striped costume show how studio glamour was carefully staged even during downtime. In 1883, Timber Yellow Robe, Henry Standing Bear, and Wounded Yellow Robe were photographed at Carlisle Indian Industrial School. Then again, 3 years later, enforced before and after portraits. An early 1900s, Michigan family sits for a studio portrait, posed with rigid posture, formal clothes, and a painted backdrop meant to signal respectability. On February 12, 2004, San Francisco began issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples after Mayor Gavin Newsom ordered the city clerk to start, defying state law and igniting the winter of love. José Sebastián de Goyeneche y Barrera, born in Arequipa in 1784, became Bishop of Arequipa and led the church through Peru's shift from Spanish rule to a new republic. He donated his fortune to build a hospital. In 1963, Cairo, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser greets United States Vice President Richard Nixon and Pat Nixon with a formal handshake. The image captures Cold War diplomacy in a newly assertive Egypt that both superpowers were trying to influence. An Italian tank pushes through a river crossing, its tracks half submerged while the turret stays level to keep control. Water crossings were a high-risk test of traction and engine sealing, and one mistake could leave the crew stranded in the current. In 1967 Vietnam, United States riflemen moved through tall grass with bandoliers and rifles ready, scanning the tree line. The photo captures how speed, silence, and split-second decisions mattered more than heavy gear in jungle patrols. On February 11, 1963, Julia Child began The French Chef on Boston's public station WGBH, bringing French techniques into American homes. The series ran 212 episodes through 1973. Women Air Force Service Pilots veteran Jerry Badger died on January 17, 2026, at age 104. She was one of just 1,074 women who earned wings in that program. On January 25, 1945, an F-6F-5 Hellcat of Fighter Squadron 20 lifts off from USS Lexington CV-16 into open Pacific sky. The Hellcat became the Navy's workhorse carrier fighter, built to survive hard landings and still fly again. This 1927 photo shows ore being sorted at the El Rosario mine in Comayagua, Honduras, with the caption noting, "Native boys doing the work." It is a blunt snapshot of how industrial mining depended on child labor. In September 1942, with the Red Banner Baltic Fleet, a mortar crew fires in support of Marines moving forward. Shot by Boris Borisovich Vasyutinsky, it shows the low, hidden setup that let mortars hit targets without direct line of sight. In 1931 to 1932, sailors and workers dismantle USS Chase in the San Diego Bay area, turning a warship into scrap piece by piece. In 1942, young Japanese men train by hauling a heavy boat across a dock under a rising flag. The drill shows how war preparation reached ordinary youth, turning strength and teamwork into a daily routine. In January 1942, Soviet soldiers stand at the Maloyaroslavets Monument, honoring the heroes of the Patriotic War of 1812, photographed by Ivan Shagan. It is a wartime message in stone. One invasion remembered while another was being fought. In 1989, Communist Poland, shoppers stand in a long line just to enter a grocery store. The queue itself was the signal. Shortages could turn basic food into an all-day mission. In February 1944, Lieutenant Alexander Vratsiu poses on his Hellcat aboard USS Intrepid, flashing a grin after another mission. By the end of World War II, he was the Navy's fourth highest ace, credited with 19 aerial victories. Soldiers crowd a trench for a makeshift feast, eating and drinking inches from the front line. The surreal contrast is the story, a normal meal staged inside a battlefield dugout. Officers of the 59th Infantry Regiment from Salzburg pose outside a rough hut, their commander Colonel Albori centered in a fur Pelsrock. The mix of heavy coats and field uniforms shows how rank and warmth mattered as much as weapons on a cold posting. In February 1991, during Desert Storm, an 82nd Airborne paratrooper from the 313th Military Intelligence Battalion collects signals intelligence in cold rain to support 4th Battalion, 325th Airborne Infantry. On December 24, 1948, Holocaust survivor Joseph Gutmann reunites with Master Sergeant William Best, the soldier who liberated him and later became his adoptive father. In 1944 to 1945, Piedmont, members of the Guardia Nazionale Repubblicana, pose with rifles and an officer at center, turning a street corner into a propaganda-style group portrait. This B-25H Mitchell of the 12th Bomb Group, 82nd Bomb Squadron, carried nose art called Eaton Kitty, painted by Norman L. Harms. The original name was judged inappropriate by higher command, so the crew painted it out and kept only Kitty. In 1893, worshippers sit inside the Yochanan Ben Zakkai Sephardic Synagogue in Jerusalem's Old City, a space built by 1610 in the Jewish Quarter. It became the largest Sephardic synagogue in the city, with its arched doors. On April 18, 1947, Brazilian architect Oscar Niemeyer studies blueprints for the United Nations headquarters in New York. The quiet desk scene hides a global project, designing a building meant to symbolize post-war diplomacy for decades. In 1963, Tunisia, a street poster advertises the Egyptian epic film Saladin the Victorious, turning a sidewalk into a cinema lobby. The artwork sells history as spectacle, using medieval armor and battle scenes to project modern pride across borders. In February 1991, during Operation Desert Storm, coalition forces captured an Iraqi ZSU-23-4 Shilka, a radar-guided anti-aircraft vehicle built around 4 rapid-fire cannon. In 1950s Pittsburgh, a mixed-race couple shares a kiss at a bar table while friends look on. In an era when many places still policed relationships by law and custom, this candid photo is quietly daring. This circa 1967 Black Panther Party poster shows Huey P. Newton seated in a wicker chair holding a gun and a spear, an image that became a lightning rod symbol of the era. A copy sold at auction for $2,375. In 1943, at Natal in Rio Grande do Norte, Brazil's President Getúlio Vargas met United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt to coordinate Allied supply routes. The location mattered. Natal was a key Atlantic area. In 1913, Rio de Janeiro, a group of men pose in full women's carnival dress, complete with wide hats, fans, and layered gowns. The staged portrait shows how Carnival gave people a brief public space to break everyday rules and be someone else. In early September 1979, Rhodesian Special Air Service troops moved through Mozambique during Operation Urich, photographed with Soviet RPD machine guns. The captured weapons highlight how this wore mixed gear from rival blocs. On July 27, 1951, in Las Vegas, Jane Russell poses for a public safety photo wearing one of the early car safety belts. The image shows how seat belts were first sold to the public with celebrity glamour before they became a normal habit. Constance Baker Motley became the first black woman appointed as a United States federal judge in 1966. Before that, she broke barriers as the first black woman in the New York State Senate and the first woman to serve as Manhattan Borough President. In 1908 Cincinnati, 12-year-old Antoinette Siminger sells baskets for 5 cents each at 10 at night after working since morning, photographed by Lewis Hine. The nearly sold-out sign hits hard because it is proof of a child's full-day shift on a city sidewalk. At a New York airport, an early X-ray machine is used to check what is inside luggage without opening it. This is one of the first steps toward modern screening, when hidden objects could finally be seen in seconds. On February 10, 1942, Glenn Miller receives the first-ever gold record for Chattanooga Choo Choo after it reached 1 million sales. The moment shows how the music industry started turning sales numbers into physical trophies. Commander Bruce McCandless earned the Medal of Honor after the USS San Francisco's bridge was hit and the top leaders were killed, and he took control and kept the ship fighting. In 1963, Steve McQueen and Neil Adams relax on a seaside deck in a candid photo by John Dominis. The towel-wrapped off-guard moment shows how star images were built from private downtime, not red carpets. On November 30, 1911 in Savannah, Erwin Bergdahl sits in the number 52 Benz at the American Grand Prize on a 17-mile public road course. The race ran 410 miles. On June 21, 1890, a farmer harvests hay with oxen right in front of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. The scene shows how quickly modern capitals grew over farmland, with city monuments towering over old work. At the 1936 Berlin Olympics, runners sprint past the Brandenburg Gate draped with Nazi banners as the regime staged a polished image for foreign visitors. This photo shows Olympic lacrosse players celebrating from the era when the sport appeared at the Games, and Canada won gold both times it was officially contested in 1904 and 1908. Lacrosse is set to return to the Olympics in Los Angeles in 2028. From 1912 to 1948, the Olympic Games awarded medals for art tied to sport, including painting, sculpture, literature, music, and architecture. The contests ended in 1948, largely because most entrants were professionals. In 1967 at Compiègne, a United States soldier wears a helmet scrawled with a grim, sarcastic line referencing the Kennedy-era shooter. Your great-uncle, Pedro de Lille, stands beside an XEW microphone, the station that helped define Mexico City radio's golden age. Broadcasting for 40 years, he would have been one of the voices people recognized instantly, long before television ruled. In 1890, on the Great Plains, a painted teepee stands at the center of a camp, while a rider in full regalia pauses on horseback. The wide, empty horizon makes the scene feel like a last quiet snapshot before the Plains world was reshaped by U.S. expansion. On June 26, 1928, Amelia Earhart stands on the roof of London's Hyde Park Hotel, days after crossing the Atlantic as a crew member on the Friendship. The rooftop pose sells the new kind of fame she created, an aviator who looked fearless in the city as well as the sky. In 1970's Love Story, Ryan O'Neal lifts Ally McGraw in a candid mid-laugh moment that sells the film's young love myth in one frame. The everyday clothes and winter setting made the romance feel real, not glamorous. In 1944, 22-year-old Lauren Bacall did hair and makeup screen tests for her first film, To Have and Have Not. These test shots show Hollywood engineering a star look by trying different hairstyles before cameras rolled. In 1933, on Tokyo's Ginza, the Yokosuka Naval District Landing Force marches toward Yasukuni Shrine beneath a rising sun flag. The packed sidewalks and streetcar tracks show a modern city staging military power as a public spectacle. A twin-engine United States Navy aircraft sits on a carrier deck as crew guide it with hand signals near the edge of open sea. The tight space and spinning props show how every launch and landing was a precision dance on moving steel. Born into slavery in Middle Tennessee, Mary Fields became the first African-American woman to work as a United States Postal Service star route mail carrier in 1895, starting at age 60. Her job meant hauling mail through harsh weather and long distances. In autumn 1941, a vehicle from Italy's Pasubio division crosses the Dnieper, carrying soldiers under a canvas cover. The small dog and the camera in the back turn a massive campaign into one intimate human moment. In July 1916 at the Somme, a Canadian dressing station operates in the open, with wounded men lying on stretchers as smoke rises behind them. It shows how battlefield medicine worked under constant danger, treating people just steps from the line. 1880 in Adelaide, an Aboriginal couple is photographed in kangaroo skin cloaks, posed with a spear and shield and a wooden club. The studio-style pose turned real cultural items into a staged type image, freezing people into someone else's idea of history. In 1908, Grigory Rasputin is photographed with Tsar Nicholas II's children, a rare glimpse of how close he was to the imperial family. That access later fueled rumors and panic at court because his influence seemed to come from the nursery. A B-24 bomber formation pushes through thick anti-aircraft bursts as smoke rises from a burning target below. The photo freezes the most dangerous seconds when crews had to hold a straight course through exploding flak to get out alive. In 1917, on the Isonzo front, Bosnian soldiers serving in the Austro-Hungarian army take positions among jagged rocks and aim downrange. The harsh terrain was the real enemy too, turning every move into a climb under fire. In 1980, Kabul, camels stand at a construction site, while Soviet-style apartment blocks rise behind them. The clash in one frame is real: traditional transport in the dirt, modern state housing growing in concrete. Photographed in 1919 inside the Ipatiev house in Yekaterinburg, this damaged room marks the site where the Russian imperial family was killed the year before. On January 5, 1942, the former 29th Rifle Brigade unveils new colors as the 1st Guards Rifle Brigade, moments before the assault on Spasvilki. The ceremony shows how Guard status was used to mark elite units and push morale right before combat. In January 1943, Don Front soldiers sprint through smoke past a destroyed German Panzer III. The blurred figures and frozen wreck show how battles were fought in short, chaotic bursts between burning steel. In 1931 at Alameda, California, the destroyer USS Kidder DD-319 sits stripped down and waiting for scrapping. With weapons and fittings removed, it looks like a hollow shell. Captioned as a young Marilyn Monroe on Santa Catalina Island in January 1945, this candid street photo shows a future icon still blending into everyday life. Weeks later, she would begin the pin-up modeling that helped launch her career. In 1916, French troops on horseback ford the Meuse River on the way to Verdun. The calm line of riders hides what came next. Verdun became the deadliest battle of the war and a symbol of endurance. In 1941, aboard USS Enterprise, a Grumman F-4 F-3 Wildcat from Fighter Squadron 3 gets serviced on the hangar deck with crews swarming the engine and landing gear. This is the hidden battle, constant maintenance that kept carrier fighters ready before the Pacific War exploded. In 1943, Amsterdam, Ralph Polak and Miep Krant walk wearing the forced star badges, caught in a quiet street moment. They later went into hiding and survived, making this photo a rare before frame of a life that almost vanished. In 1961, Elvis Presley poses with his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, the man who controlled his deals and image for decades. Parker remains controversial because he took huge commissions and tightly managed Elvis's career. In 1961, at the Novosibirsk Reservoir, Hydrometeorological Observatory staff measure underwater current speed through a hole in the ice. The cables, instruments, and notebook show real field science. Magdalena Maggie Estoista Leones was a teacher and mother who served as a Filipino intelligence officer during World War II, working with Russell W. Volkmann's Resistance Network. Her reports and connections helped protect lives under occupation. In a 1970s high school, students crowd into a designated smoking lounge between classes. The photo is a time capsule of how normal smoking once was, even inside school rules. On February 12, 1926, the Russian city of Novonikolayevsk was officially renamed Novosibirsk, meaning New Siberian City. This wide view captures it mid-growth, just as a railway boomtown was being rebranded into a future Siberian metropolis. Austro-Hungarian engineers crawl in no man's land to place a heavy barbed wire mat in front of their line, building a trap under enemy sight. This slow, dangerous work decided who could cross the ground later, long before any charge began. A crowded riverboat labeled Cochabamba hauls livestock across a wide, tropical-looking waterway, with people walking the pens on a wet deck. Finding this on a random film roll is the mystery. One ordinary traveler accidentally saved a snapshot of a working world far from home. Born February 12, 1900, South Carolina bluesman Pinckney "Pink" Anderson learned the road early, playing medicine shows from about age 14. On February 10, 1926, the George Washington Bridge was still just towers and a rising cable line over the Hudson River. Within 5 years, it opened as the world's longest suspension span, linking Manhattan to New Jersey in one leap. On August 22, 1918, HMS Hood rises inside a forest of cranes at John Brown Shipyard, built to be the Royal Navy's fastest, biggest battlecruiser. Only 2 years later, she became the pride of the fleet. Mike Connors stars in Tightrope, a CBS series from 1959 to 1960, playing an undercover agent whose name changes episode to episode to keep him hidden. The whole show is built on one risky idea: get close enough to organized crime to expose the bosses. In the early 1930s, Hoovervilles like this one sprang up as families built shacks from scrap after the Great Depression wiped out jobs and savings. On February 12, 1935, the United States Navy airship USS Macon went down off the California coast, ending the era of giant rigid airships. Out of 83 crewmen, only 2 died, thanks to calm seas, life jackets, and quick rescue ships. Friends, if you liked such rare historical footage and want more similar stories with facts and details, please like the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new releases.